There's a curious, infuriating thing that happens when popular media chooses a woman to be the villain of a man's backstory. It's not a new trick, it's a well-worn page in the trope playbook. And in the case of Mandy and her vilification in her first marriage, we find ourselves staring down the barrel of the Big Bang Theory's worst habits, reborn in a new and painfully predictable setting. You know the setup. There's a man, perhaps wounded, perhaps quirky, maybe even just misunderstood. He's funny, awkward in an endearing way, and deeply scarred by a past relationship. Enter the ex-wife, cold, demanding, shallow, maybe even cheating. She exists solely to justify his bitterness and awkwardness, a spectral scapegoat for all his flaws. In The Big Bang Theory, this trope reached comical heights with Howard's mother, Leonard's mom, and most egregiously, the never-seen but oft-vilified Leslie, Priya, and yes, even the early portrayal of Bernadette. But here, in a story seemingly far removed from sitcom laugh tracks, Mandy becomes a casualty of the same lazy writing and gendered cliché. Her first marriage, the details of which are murky and largely told through the lens of her ex-husband's martyrdom, is painted as the crucible that forged his flaws, and Mandy, she is the fire. She's the ambitious one, we're told, the woman who wanted too much. Maybe she pursued a career that took precedence over dinners at home. Maybe she demanded communication, affection, respect, God forbid. But the narrative never lingers on those complexities. Instead, it zooms in on her perceived emotional coldness. Her ambition becomes selfishness. Her independence becomes neglect. Her leaving the marriage, betrayal, not boundary. This, in essence, is the Mandy problem. It's the exact kind of one-dimensional vilification that The Big Bang Theory was so often criticized for. Think about how the show treated Penny's intelligence in early seasons, or how it sidelined Amy Farrah Fowler's professional success in favor of painting her as desperate for Sheldon's approval. Or how Leonard's constant emotional neglect is forgiven because he's the nice guy with an unfortunate romantic history. Now, transpose that framework to Mandy's story. The audience is given her ex-husband's side first. His bitterness is immediately validated. His narrative, his wounds, are never questioned. And Mandy's complexity, reduced to a few cold anecdotes and passive-aggressive remarks. She becomes a ghost who haunts his present relationships, a cautionary tale to his new partner. Don't be like her. The worst part, we never really hear from Mandy herself. She doesn't get a monologue, no flashback, no voice. Just like so many of the sidelined women in TBBT, she becomes a construct rather than a character. And when women are turned into cautionary tales rather than complex individuals, everyone loses, especially the audience. Because imagine, for a moment, if Mandy's story were told differently. What if she was the one who carried the emotional labor of the marriage until she finally cracked? What if she'd begged for compromise but met silence or condescension? What if her ambition was not selfish, but survival? What if her decision to leave wasn't villainy, but the most courageous thing she'd ever done? That version of the story demands effort. It demands writers who aren't afraid to show that both parties can hurt and be hurt. That complexity doesn't always come with clean resolution or sitcom-style reconciliation. It demands an understanding that female characters can be flawed without being condemned. But too often, the cultural template takes the easier route. It frames the first wife as a foil, the dark figure who makes the new woman look like a saint. It turns female agency into antagonism. It places the weight of male trauma on her shoulders and refuses to share the burden. This isn't to say that Mandy was perfect. No one is. But perfection isn't the point, fairness is. Nuance is. Complexity is. And these things are so often denied to women in storytelling, especially those who occupy the role of X. Consider how The Big Bang Theory gave Sheldon room to be rude, dismissive, even cruel, but made him lovable through layers of vulnerability and narrative attention. Now imagine Mandy with the same courtesy. Imagine her contradictions explored, her mistakes contextualized, her growth allowed. Instead, we're given a punchline in the shape of a person. A story told only through rearview mirrors. A warning label rather than a woman. And just like that, her story becomes less about her and more about who she's supposed to justify. Her ex-husband's fears, his failures, his emotional constipation, wrapped in a bow labeled, "She did this to me." It's the same dynamic that let Leonard off the hook for so much of his insecurity, or let Raj's misogyny slide because he's just lonely. It's the narrative alibi that men in these stories are handed freely, while the women are handed character assassination. So what's the fix? It's simple. Let Mandy be real. Let her speak. Let her own her story, not just inhabit someone else's version of it. Show the disagreements, the compromises attempted and failed, the moments of joy, the pain of disconnect. Show her side. If a story chooses to include a past marriage, then it owes its audience the full picture, not a trope disguised as truth. Not a villain wearing the mask of a woman who simply refused to disappear for the sake of someone else's comfort. In the end, Mandy's vilification isn't just lazy writing, it's harmful. It reinforces the idea that a woman must be either a savior or a saboteur, never simply human. It encourages audiences to view complexity as culpability. And it mirrors one of the worst habits of modern sitcoms, letting male protagonists skate by on charm and backstory, while the women are left holding the baggage and the blame. It's time to retire that trope. And it's time to give Mandy her story back. Would you like a version of this as a blog post or formatted for an opinion column?